Good Sunday morning. I'm Jaden Jefferson, and welcome into this week's Community Focus. Immigration enforcement and border security are top priorities for the second Trump administration. And so to get some insight into what the undocumented worker community locally looks like, I'm joined by Baldemar Velasquez, the president of the Farm Labor Organizing Committee. Take a look.
We have 12 to 13,000 undocumented people in the city of Toledo alone. I don't know what the numbers are in the rural area, but there are some, and some of the agricultural workers that do come. We don't have the agriculture labor intensiveness that we had, 15 years ago right now. We lost the cucumber industry to Canada, Ontario, and the South, deep South, because these manufacturers that rely on these agricultural products like cucumbers and tomatoes and so on, they source them all over the world now. And it's very difficult to for us who defend the people to keep up with those changing trends. And so we have to sort of stay ahead of the game and go to where the people are, because many people settled in the area and had their children here. Their children are American citizens, but the parents may still be undocumented. So if we have 10 to 12,000 here in the city of Toledo alone, we got more in the greater Toledo area. And plus in the outlying areas, you can go to communities like in Napoleon, Ohio, Wauseon, Delta. You have sprinklings of Mexican families in those areas, and they intermix with the people that are undocumented that come into our areas. So it's, you can't take a census of those people because they work in the shadows. They work under the radar, the most people. But here in Toledo, you don't have to go very far to find them. So restaurants, hospitality, industry, construction, you name it, they're all over the place.
I know we've seen across the country that there's been some heightened anxiety regarding ICE raids. Would you say that same anxiety is being felt here in Northwest Ohio?
To some degree, I've heard that some families are not sending their kids to school because of that. They're afraid when actually the school system is being very good about instructing the administrators of our public schools in terms of what happens if ICE comes to your school. We're trying to train people. We've had community meetings. We had a packed house here last Tuesday, giving people what their rights are in their encounters with ICE at schools, at workplaces. Schools are essentially workplaces also, and not only workplaces, but at home and in the streets or, in your vehicles, what their rights are, and the right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, all the fundamental things. The only people in jeopardy are really those that have been here without papers less than 2 years, that are under the expedited removal window. And those who've been here more than 2 years have a right to go before an immigration judge and assess their status. But a lot of people don't know that. And so we're trying to get the word out to people about those things.
And there will obviously be people who disagree about the impact of people that are undocumented in the country. What would you say to those who disagree with you?
They're privy to a lot of false information. And in this day and age, particularly with the administration that we have now, and Elon Musk, who controls a lot of the social media in this country with his companies. I was reading a little while ago a report that many of the reports that are issued by ICE right now, the immigration arrests and an example of this and that, a lot of them happened years ago, and they updated it out so it comes out at the top of your Facebook site as if it's just happened this year. And there's a lot of misinformation floating around, and it's kind of hard to keep up correcting those people about what the real facts are. And so, I would, if somebody comes to me and says, well, I heard this report, okay, show me the evidence and let's talk about it. But for the most part, you're going to find that immigrants, and particularly those from Mexico, Guatemala, are more law-abiding than our current American citizens. The crime statistics show nationally that immigrants and world, especially if you're undocumented, because they don't want to get in trouble with the law. They want to obey everything. The immigrant people I know here in Toledo that are undocumented, they go out every morning. One lady says, I go out check my car every morning, make sure all my lights are working, my turn signals and everything is proper. So there's no reason for anyone to stop me. People are law abiding more than the regular population.
And just kind of give some insight because I think that story there that you were telling about someone you knew who is undocumented and does those things kind of speak to that experience because I do think it also is worth noting because that's what the data shows is that people that are undocumented are less likely to engage in criminal activity. So I know that's kind of been the target of a lot of these recent actions, but kind of speak to that though for people that may have never had the experience of being undocumented and may not know how you go about living life that way.
It's very difficult living in the shadows. And but people, like they find jobs, you find they're the best workers because their livelihood depends on putting in your hours and your time. I referred, a small group of workers to a horse farm in Michigan, and uh, the employer says they're really good workers. I saw them several weeks later. This happened a couple of years ago, but this is a good example. And they said, I said, how are you guys doing there? Do you like working there? She said, oh yeah, we really like it. But I could tell that they were refraining from saying something. So I pushed them on. So, well, what is it? What doubts that you have? I said, well, the one thing confuses us. He said, the farmer comes out, who owns the horse farm. He says he comes out and tells us to take these breaks, every 2 or 3 hours. And he said, we don't understand that. Um, so in other words, they're used to work. If they come from Mexico, there's no such thing down there as food stamps, assistance programs or anything like that. Down there, if you don't work, you don't eat. So they got this phenomenal work ethic and taking a break, a 15-minute break or a 20-minute break every 2 hours to them is kind of alien. You say, well, why are they doing that? We want to get this job done. They're looking at to get there. They know that they feel like if we get the job done quickly and efficiently and good quality, the employer's going to like us. He's going to have us stay here. My dad beat that into us many years ago when I was raised as a migrant worker working on farms. My dad always said, and we worked for a lot of growers, farmers that were good and some were bad. But even with the bad farmers, he said, do the best work you can. Try to do it better than anyone else in these crews because next year, when we come back to this area to harvest crops, everybody will want you because you'll have the reputation of being a good worker. And then you can choose the employer that you want to work for. And so hard work ethic means that you are an appealing, you're attractive as a worker to get hired and make a living.
And kind of speak to one of the talking points that we hear a lot nationally, people saying that these are jobs that American citizens already wanted. Is that the case here in our area, or are these jobs that no one else had wanted to do?
No, these are jobs that are unattractive to American citizens, to many American citizens. They're the lowest wage jobs. They're the more difficult jobs, and many Americans. Well, you're not going to find white Americans wanting to go out and harvest crops. That's non-existent anymore. You're not going to find anybody who's going to even if you go to the current statistics in the H-2A program, the temporary work visa in agriculture, where people can come, we represent people under our umbrella agreement, about 9,000 of them on over 600 farms in North Carolina and Virginia. And when they come here, they understand very well that they got that job because no Americans wanted them. The farmers have to publicize the jobs ahead of being authorized to bring in temporary workers with his visa. You have to prove that the local peoples, and they say if you publish invitations for say 1,000 jobs, and out of those 1,000 positions, you get maybe 50 white people that come and apply. And out of those 50 people, maybe 25 show up for the first day of work, and none of them last more than a day or two. None of them.
One concern that does come up, though, is the potential for exploitation. Is that something that people here in our community have pointed out, or is this just something that happens in other cases, other communities?
Well, to be fair, there's a lot of good farmers that want to do the right thing and try to follow all the laws, but there's some bad ones. What's particularly troubling right now in the agriculture sector are these independent farm labor contractors. For some reason, the government has, in the regulations that's passed by Congress, the definition of an employer. These guys that are independent contractors can qualify as an employer. And so, for instance, they're able to apply for these H-2A visas for agriculture, and they get these workers in, and they're the worst violators of the guidelines of the law. The prevailing wage, that is ignored almost wholesale with these independent farm labor contracts. And right now, many farmers are turning towards these independent farm labor contractors and not hiring these workers directly because it distances themselves from the liabilities. In other words, if they violate the law and they don't pay the prevailing wage, I haven't checked what Ohio's is this year, but I think it's going to be like around $18 an hour compared to our federal minimum wage of $7.25. So these guest workers under the federal regulations should be paying this amount. Now, the growers who recruit them directly, the farmers, do pay that wage because it's a requirement, and they got bookkeepers, they got accounting, they pay their taxes and things like that. But the independent farm labor contractors, forget it. These guys have no, they're fly-by-nights, they're here today, gone tomorrow. They bring in these crews and they move them over there. And a lot of those workers overstay their visas where they're in the work order to get those workers authorized for the visa. You have to put in the work order the actual work sites and the locations where they're going to be living. And many times when you finish with the grower that you came with, boom, they move them, they overstay their visa and don't really work on that farm anymore. At that point, they become undocumented automatically.
And that is this week's show. Thanks for watching, and have a great start to your week on Monday.